From the heart of Maine, this is the DuView podcast.
All right, and welcome to this month's episode of the DuView podcast. I am your host, Du, a.k.a. Ryan Dumont, and guys, welcome to 2024. We made it. Definitely exciting in a lot of ways, and happy to be back here with you guys for another year of DuView podcast content and more episodes and everything like that. Still keeping true to our one episode a month format here with the occasional bonus episode. Because as folks know that have been fans of the podcast for a while, I am very much still in school to get my electrical license, and that's another part of my life, which is on another journey. But basically, you know, it's been a good start to the new year so far, guys. To be completely honest with you, I know that we kind of touched base on a couple things in the holiday roundtable and things like that. So just kind of set the stage for you guys. I want to kick off this episode by just kind of letting you guys know where I'm at in 2024, because did a lot of like solo episodes towards the beginning of things last year, and then kind of had a good plethora of guests to round out the year. So you didn't hear from me one-on-one quite as much, which is okay. I got no problem with that at all personally here, and it's just different. We've got a different studio set up and stuff like that now. As you guys see me trying to position myself as centrally as possible for this, having such a large space with one person. It's different when you have four people here, and that's what we were set up for. To cap off last year. And so if you really haven't seen the holiday roundtable, I'm joined by three of my college roommates, or my three college roommates. It's a fantastic episode. You guys are really going to want to check that out before getting too enthralled here with our new episodes here in 2024. It's a good way to round things out and get going with all the new stuff that will be coming. And so I guess, like I said, just want to kick off this episode by starting to talk about life as it is, where I'm at with things and everything like that, and just kind of let you guys know where I'm at with things. And so, like I said, life is good for the most part. I'm in school right now 4 days a week, working 1 day a week. So that creates a interesting dynamic in terms of, surviving and things like that, pay-wise. As you guys can imagine, I'm not just trying to sit here and bitch. I'm just saying when you work 1 day a week, I'm gaining a lot in the educational side of things for my license, but it makes the short-term difficult, as I know I've probably talked about on here before. But, we make do, and we definitely make do. We have to. And I am due, so, there we go. We definitely make it. But that said, definitely things at school are different. Getting away from more residential stuff like we did last semester, and focusing more towards on like your commercial and industrial side of things with motor controls and different sets of electronics, which are used from anything from like motion sensors to engine starters in the mechanical world, to a whole different plethora of things, really, which is really, really interesting. And that's kind of what I've come to the realization very quickly with my short time in the electrical trade, is that there's a lot you can do. It's not just like of course you could wire houses for the rest of your life, and that would still be a good living and everything like that. But there is so much that one can do as an electrician, or specifically just in the electrical trade itself. It's you could do anything from stage lighting to elevator work. I mean, you have to get other specialized trainings on top of everything that I'm going through right now, but the world is really your oyster in lack of a better terms, in terms of this trade and a lot of the other trades too. They can open up a lot of other avenues for things. And so that's why I highly recommend people get into the trades, not just everybody become an electrician. I mean, I'm biased, obviously. I love my trade, and I think we're the best ones to do it. And I mean, other than carpenters, you really kind of need, your plumbers and electricians, because if not, things don't go. You don't have flow, as they say. But it's just been different, because, like I said, it's getting out of an area that I'm very comfortable with, working in like a residential setting, and moving on to the more impactful and definitely more complicated, I guess I'll say. It all builds off of each other. I'm not going to say that, oh, well, like you have no idea, but it's definitely more complicated and it's bigger voltage and it's more energy and it's more dangerous, frankly. Not that 120 isn't dangerous as it is. I mean, you can die off a 120 outlet, given special circumstances or just given the circumstances. But like once you start playing with 240 and 277, 208, and eventually your bigger upper voltages, 400 amp and upwards. I mean, like that's not something you want to joke about. It'll for lack of a better term, it will ruin your day. So to speak. But that said, guys, I've definitely learned a lot. I have some great instructors. If anybody I will say Maine in general, but I mean, obviously you could attend KVCC and not be from Maine. But I fantastic electrical program at Kennebec Valley Community College, and again, this experience opened my eyes up to the community college system and frankly how fantastic it is. And like I said, I have some great instructors who are very much masters in their own fields, and I also have some great schoolmates or classmates, so to speak. Made some new friends, and shout out to the folks KVC electrical program. You guys are great. Very tight knit group. Everybody's pretty friendly with each other. We go to lunch with each other. We hang out. We're all in the same trade, and odds are we'll end up overlapping and seeing each other in the workplace at some point. It's funny how just like, you're with this a set group for a certain amount of time and you're like almost forced to become either hate each other or become close. And I'm glad that we've had the come close part of things because it's good to have community. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people miss out on these days, and not community to the sense of only being with people who you agree with 100% on everything. You see eye to eye on everything. It's good to have members of the community that don't always see eye to eye with each other because you have the sharing of ideas. There's 100 different ways to do it. We actually talked, as people say, there's 100 different ways to skin a cat. Well, we actually talked about this whole saying in class the other day, and my instructor reminded us that the full saying is actually there's more than one way to skin a catfish. Skinning cats is kind of weird, and I had to agree with him. I mean, I don't see us being a feline pelt pro nation. I mean, at least I didn't think we were. Then again, things change every day that I don't know about. But I don't think we like to skin cats here in the United States. But I could be wrong. But that said, though, it's being able to bring a different culmination of different thinking and ideas together, and being able to think for yourself, but also collaborate with others, and that's huge. I think that a lot of people have no issue, quote unquote, thinking for themselves, but a lot of folks, in my opinion only, struggle when it comes to actually collaborating with others and working together. I can think of one, instance from my four-year degree track at St. A's where we had a history class, Civil War and Reconstruction, and they tasked the professor, Professor DeBrule, tasked the group of us with writing a paper with 4 different people doing each section or something like that. And eventually the group just agreed upon to have one person write it with the other people providing support, but then that didn't fall out. And I guess what I'm trying to get at here, in this group, you had a lot of different people thinking for themselves, myself included, but you didn't have a lot of collaborative effort, and a lot of the thought was steered away from that because everybody, wanted to have their notes for their section or whatever, and that's great. And then on top of that, you had the complication of the person who wrote the paper getting upset with all the other people, not feeling that they were carrying their load, but they, offered to write the whole paper to have it be in one voice to have good flow in the first place. So it's interesting, folks. Like I said, I make it sound so simple and idealistic about, collaboration and community, but some people just don't want it. Some people want to be, the Lone Ranger, the lone wolf, so to speak. But I really do think with the way that we human beings are made, we definitely want to be in community, and I'm the same way myself. I want to be in specifically the community with my friends. A lot of the time, I love my friends; they're a huge part of my life. Both my friends from college and from home. And speaking of my friends and I from home, we are going to be headed up to camp as we do every February for President's Day weekend. So we're definitely excited for that. Although this winter has definitely been a little interesting to say the least, folks. I don't. I'm not. I mean, given I don't know. It's just interesting with the amount of snow that we've had, and I apologize for stammering there. I'm just forming my words into like how I want to display things with the weather, because down in central Maine the snow has been like non-existent. Basically, we'd get rain and then it would snow. We'd get rain and then it would snow, and so it was just kind of strange in that regard. Whereas in years past we always had snow. And I mean, I'm not going to try to blame it on like any of the specifically the man-made aspects of it or anything like that. I'm just stating as the fact that we haven't had normal snowfall in the last few years, and it's been interesting. I mean, like last year, I didn't feel like winter really started until about February when we did go up to camp for the first time. And maybe I think I did like 3 decent snowmobiling trips last year. I will admittedly have not gone on this trip yet. I mean, camp will probably be my first. It's just been a mix of I had to get my sled worked on, which I finally did, thank God. Shout out to TJ for giving me a hand swapping out my bogey wheels. Appreciate it, buddy. But also at the same time, just with this 1 day a week, financial thing is just picking and choosing and trying to make the most out of a trip. And I understand you're not going to get it right every time. You're not going to be perfect, but it's just wait. I'm trying to wait for them big snowfalls if we're going to get it. I might be screwing myself in that regard. It's very possible. I might not get it right at all, and we may not have a decent snowstorm like that. But I really hope we do, and I really do think that we will. To be completely honest with you guys, it's been tough for the snowmobiling folks this year. I mean, the lakes still, I don't think, are super frozen in certain areas. Like I was looking at articles last weekend, people are still going through on the ice on like Moosehead and stuff like that. And I understand that like, oh, Moosehead's unpredictable, and like a lot of people have said that over the years and whatever. But it's like when we're used to having good ice. It's good solid ice, not only for the snowmobilers, but also for the ice fishermen as well. It makes it difficult for the Maine winter economy. And I mean, like you look at like the snow making that they have to do up at the ski resorts, whether it be Sugarloaf, Sunday River, or Saddleback. I mean, you can no longer survive the winter without making snow. It's not like the ice fishers and stuff, and the snowmobilers can have that same luxury because it's spread out. It's not, in one area. It's not a ski resort or an ice fishing resort. I mean, it's natural. It's whatever pond you can get on, so to speak here. So it's just I miss it. I'm hoping to get some good ice fishing in and some good riding in when we go up to camp, but that is still to be seen. I mean, at the time of recording this, it's I think like 40 degrees out in February. It doesn't exactly allow itself to maintaining snow conditions. And I know a lot of the I'm not, and I'll be honest with you too, folks. Everybody's like, "Oh, there's snow out there. There's powder out there." It's like I'm not the biggest off-trail rider. I'll be straight up with you, folks. I mean, you can ask me, and I'll tell you. I mean, I don't overly. I like trail riding. I like being able to go long distances and seeing things. And it's just riding through lumber cuts and stuff like that in the woods is not where I get my enjoyment in the sport or in the hobby, depending on whatever you want to call snowmobiling. But that said, I don't disagree with the people that do it. I do know that backcountry riding is more limited here in this state than it is like out in the Midwest or out in up northern Canada and stuff like that, or out in the middle provinces in Canada. But I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. I just, like I said, I feel I may be also the type of snowmobile. I have a 4-stroke snowmobile. It's heavier. I'm relatively strong, but I'm not going to tell you I'm Hulk Hogan by any means, and so it's tiring. And I'm tired, working during the week, and you want to relax a little bit too, under the sense, and so it's more enjoyable to go hop on the trail, and go do a couple hundred miles in a day, and then stay overnight somewhere and get back and do another couple miles the next day before heading home. But that's just what I guess kind of where my interests in terms of the sport lie, and that's not always the case for everybody else, and with everybody has different different things they want to do, whether it be backcountry riding or different types of riding they want to do. It's just like there are different types of people. Like some people like Asian cars, like your racer type cars, and some people like American muscle cars, and some people like European sports cars because they're aerodynamic and engineered, where the American cars are all rough and muscle and stuff like that, and horsepower. So it's there's preferences for everybody, different strokes for different folks, obviously, and nothing against that. It's just where my areas of interest of lying or lie, and so Uh, Speaking of areas of interest, obviously talking about my time in the electrical trade and what I like doing for work, really kind of ties into the, I guess, this next part of the episode, I guess, guys, because I want to talk a little bit about how we ended out 2013 and 2023, excuse me, not 2013, goddamn, 2023 and into 2024 here just in a second after I grab a quick drink of water. And speaking of water, for those of you who didn't know, Dew is a huge seltzer water guy. If there's any local seltzer water companies or even Hannaford, like if you guys want to sponsor me, I will happily take cases of seltzer water as payment. I don't know, some people don't like it. I like the flavored seltzer water. Quick sidebar there before going on. But speaking of water in Maine, if you guys didn't see or haven't, looked outside the window recently, we had a good amount of wintry and also watery weather over here as we ended out 2023 and got into 2024. Just trying to touch base on some of these, like, I guess, superstorm activities, so to speak. I mean, specifically starting out with the one that we ended, right before the Christmas 2023. The flooding, first that came from the snow melt and the high rains, and on top of that, you had dam fail. Some of the dams in northern Maine fail. They couldn't get the gates to close and things like that, which resulted in torrents of water. I mean, where my office is located is on the exit arm of Bond Brook, which is one of the major tributaries for the Kennebec River, as well as the Kennebec River comes along Mill Park in Augusta. That's where my office is. Like I said, I work for Augusta Fuel Company. So the office is right kind of in this like perfect flood zone, unfortunately. And back if anybody is a scholar of Maine history, in 1987 we had a major flood, and everybody, remember the flood of 87 where the water went up, and you can go, if you go downtown, you can see that there are water lines still on a lot of the buildings or there's a marker say, the water got this high in 1987, and this was pretty freaking darn close, guys. I mean, it wasn't quite up as high, but folks that had been around it, where I was working for the storm in 87 were like, yeah, this is the next worst thing. I think it was like the third worst flood, and kind of or second worst. It was very, very, very destructive. I mean, our business, my shop got hit pretty hard. I mean, we had to throw away a lot of material, just because of storm damage and stuff like that. I mean, you can't really reuse a lot of electrical supplies once it gets wet. I mean, breakers and stuff like that, you just have to throw them away because they're no longer safe to use. I mean, it's just is the way it is. And the bottom floor of our office got destroyed. There was 8 feet of water down there. All the drywall, everything has to get ripped out, or if not, you're going to have mold and everything like that. And so you think about just my office having to do that, and then you multiply it times all of downtown Augusta, all of downtown Hollowell, all of downtown Gardner, and basically anybody else that was on any of the other downtowns or any other towns and cities in Maine that are on some of these major rivers. Whether you were up in Skowhegan, where my mom's side of the family's from, they had major flooding issues up there. All the way up and down the rivers, and out in the Lewiston area on the Androscoggin, they had plenty of issues out there. I mean, everybody had some flooding issues. If you were, like I said, if you were on a river, you had some issues. And this is, like right before Christmas. On top of it, trees are coming down because there's so much saturation in the ground from all the water we had this previous year, and it created this perfect storm. And I mean that I guess pun intended, really, of just flooding, loss of power, and after loss of power, no heat, and then freeze-ups. Because literally the day after the flood, the temperature dropped exponentially. And like I said, you had electrical services ripped off people's houses. You had, fire alarm systems going off. You could hear the fire bells going off in downtown Augusta because there was, the sprinkler systems were going off and stuff because you had the air go through the lines and everything like that. Like, it was just the level of devastation was impressive, and I mean that in the worst way possible. It's just not good, for lack of a better term. But that was Christmas for a lot of people, and a lot of people didn't pre-plan. I can even just think of people in the area that left cars down in flood zones. I mean, I was lucky that I came back when I did, because we had to move all of our vehicles across the street in the Mill Park parking lot because we already had water coming up into our parking lot. Um, at work. And so when I came back after finishing a job, it was probably about 2 hours late, 2 hour interval in between parking and coming back. And I had to move my truck because there was already water coming into the Mill Park parking lot across the street because the river had swelled so much. And, at that point, it just became a mad dash to get as much out of our office as possible, tools and, paperwork and different things like that were stored in the basement. However, with the water going so high, though, we lost our electrical panels in the basement. We lost the employee break room, a bunch of pieces, parts, and storage things. I mean, I know, like I said, same thing the electrical shop. When some of this stuff gets wet, you can't reuse it. Tools and that under that, like, I mean, just and then the telephone communication, Wi-Fi, all of our network paneling was all down there. Like I said, not perhaps the best spot for it, and obviously things have been relocated since, but it put a lot of things into perspective for people who had just been, had things in storage in their basements on on Water Street and on the surrounding low-lying areas that had just, I mean, I know for a fact ServPro and like all these other waste and like mildew and all these removal and restoration companies, I mean, they're making a killing right now. I mean, given they have to, I mean, you need the services. I'm not, you know, pushing anything back against that at all. By no means, you need people to come in and clean up after major disasters. But it's just like, man, oh man, and you look at some of the buildings, and I've been in some of these places that are just devastated. I mean, you think about it, if you had the entire, like I think about where I am, a studio in the basement. I mean, you'd have a drum kit flipped over, oil tanks flipped over, and leaking all over the place. So then you had to get the Department of Environmental Protection involved and FEMA, and it's just created a whole laundry list of issues for everybody, from business owners to tenants in apartment buildings to those of us just trying to work. I mean, I remember the day after when people were after the first day of rain and flooding. I mean, it was hard to just drive around Augusta, like my hometown or my city where I work, do the majority of the work, just because it was there were so many people out trying to get gas for generators, and just no one had anything to do, so they were just driving out and about and just trying to like check up on the river and see how devastated things are, which made more congestion for folks like myself and the line workers and stuff like that. And it took an extra half an hour to get anywhere. It was interesting, and that's kind of why I want to reflect on this, and then on to the more coastal storm damage in just a second, because like this stuff isn't, I don't know, it feels like the storms have been extra destructive and things like that, which I'll touch upon a little bit more when I talk about our friends down on the coast and how even more battered they were than really a lot of the devastation we ran into here. I mean, to be honest with you folks, I mean, I worked yesterday, and we're still dealing with issues or cleanup or jobs from the flood. I mean, we're still in some of these places changing out electrical panels, changing out, lighting and things that were, flood damaged. And that's just the way it is, unfortunately. I mean, I kind of feel bad for some of these people who have lost their homes temporarily. But what are you to do? I mean, that's natural event, natural disaster. I mean, you can pre-plan, but unfortunately, you obviously can't pre-plan for just about everything. And then, guys, if you fast forward, getting away from just the Augusta, Central Maine area, if you fast forward to 2024, specifically January, just a few weeks ago, in all honesty, we looked to Maine's coast, where we had another set of really bad storms, and I was actually down in Portland during these sets of storms and got to see some of the powerful winds and rains firsthand. But with all of these coastal with this coastal storm, not all of these, but with this specific coastal storm, rather, excuse me, we had a lot of destruction in terms of historical monuments and other pieces of Maine's history that have been here for years and years and years that we didn't think about. I mean, Maine's beaches took a beating. I mean, areas that have already had a major issue like Popham Beach with erosion, they're going to have a whole set of contingency plans to fix things down there, on top of many of the other areas, which I'll talk about in just a minute here. some of Maine's coast is known for its lighthouses, right? And even some of our most well-known lighthouses took a huge beating, which is scary because some of these, lighthouses have been here for a few hundred years, and they've seen and gone through some of the most powerful storms in Maine's history. But according to the New York Times, quote, among the best-known sites to suffer damage were the century-old Shore Path in Bar Harbor and the Pemaquid Point Lighthouse in Bristol, depicted in Maine's commemorative quarter. Boatyards lost equipment in harborside machine shops. Some of the state's 4,000 to 4,500 lobstermen lost hundreds of traps. On top of another very popular tourist area, Camp Ellis, outside of the Saco Portland area, was also devastated. And folks that have lived in that area for years and years and years. Actually, funny enough, I have a personal connection to Camp Ellis. My uncle, or great uncle technically, who was from, originally Booth Bay Harbor, but then ended up living up in Aroostook County, up in the town of the city of Fort Kent, town of Fort Kent, and was a teacher at the university whose camp I have the pleasure of going to every summer. He being from this not only being from the Booth Bay area and things like that, he spent a lot of time down in the Camp Ellis area, and so when he would come, we had one opportunity where we were able to go down and have dinner with him and some of his friends from the Biddeford area. But that said, we go across the street from I can't remember the name of the restaurant off the top of my head, but a great seafood restaurant. I'm sure they're going to find some way to weather the storm and reopen. If not, I'll have to double check on that. I probably should have done my research on it, but I researched just about everything else except that. Sorry, guys. But great seafood restaurant, or just family restaurant down in Camp Ellis. It's literally like right across from the UNE campus. You can literally look across like the harbor, and UNE is right there. But anyway, my uncle, great uncle rather, had a friend that was down there, and she was one of the first female to get her captain's licenses in the state of Maine, or maybe even in the whole United States. So like I said, a very maritime friendly area, very much a maritime focused area. And you can go up to buy lobster and stuff and fish off the guys that are on the dock that are coming in off their boats. This is a pretty essential area for a lot of folks making their living that is now destroyed, in a lot of ways, and has suffered a great amount of damage. So it's just finding ways out of situations like this to, improve things, not improve things, but to rebuild things and to improve back to where we were, prior to the storm, which is expensive. As you guys have seen, with a lot of these major storms, they've issued, whether it be states of emergency or gotten, like I said, the federal government / FEMA involved, because it's just gotten to the point where there's so much damage that the states couldn't do it, or especially the state of Maine, being a small rural state as it is, couldn't do it alone off just their state budget. I mean, you can't budget for everything, let alone acts of God. It's hard you can do your best, but there's only so much money you can prepare for. There's only so much damage, rather, and so much money you can put aside for damage. I mean, there's only so much that we can also fathom, as human beings too. And I mean, there was many write-ups in the national media as well as in the local media, whether that be news. This is from CBS News. Maine storms wash away iconic fishing shacks. However, expose long buried 9/11 shipwreck on beach. So it's kind of like a little duality here. We lost. I'll just read the article and you guys will get the hint of it. So this is according to CBS News from January 15th, 2024. Record high tide in Maine washed away 3 historic fishing shacks that had stood since the 1800s and formed the backdrop of countless photographs. The dramatic incident, which was caught on video, happened just 2 days after a shipwreck from 1911 was exposed by another storm on another beach in Maine. Lady by the name of Michelle Erskine said she was visiting Fisherman's Point at Willard Beach in South Portland on Saturday when she captured video footage of the last 2 wooden shacks sliding into the ocean. "Oh no, they're both going in. Oh no," she said, as it can be heard through the video. Erskine, who had lived in South Portland all her life, said her son had his senior photos taken at the shacks, and wedding parties often visited them as well. "It's truly a sad day for the community and the residents of South Portland," Erskine said in an interview with the Associated Press on Sunday. "History is literally being washed away." The shacks are owned by the city of South Portland and had just undergone a facelift in October when they were repainted. They were the last in a series of fishing shacks to predate the city's incorporation. After they were the first built along the shore and moved to their most recent location in the 1880s. Erskine said they once housed lobster traps and fishing gear. Two of the shacks were destroyed in earlier storms in 1978. A record 14.57 foot high tide was measured in Portland just after noon on Saturday after the storm surge was amplified what had already been the month's highest tide, according to the National Weather Center. That broke the previous record of 14.17 feet in 1978, and the highest since the measurements came in 1912, the Weather Service also stated. And again, we in Maine, taking a quick break from the article, guys, we are, I guess, blessed or cursed, depending on how you want to look at it, with astronomical high tide, and this is also going on at this point, too. Which, again, this really shocked people, especially those that had lived on the coast for a long time. The surge flooded some homes in Old Orchard Beach and in Kennebunkport in Maine and the Hampton Beach in New Hampshire. Quote, I've seen a flood, but I've never seen anything like this, and I've lived here for 35 years, Hampton resident Susan McGee told CBS Boston. The flood came just days after previous storms damaged one of Maine's most beloved lighthouses, which is featured on the state quarter. Very sadly, all three fishing shacks at Willard Beach have been completely destroyed from the storm, the city wrote in a special social media post. But the South Portland Historical Society sounded on a note of hope, saying that on social media that it had prepared for such an event by last year enlisting architects and engineers to create drawings so that everything would be in place to build reproductions of the shacks if needed. The society is asking for donations to rebuild. During the storm, a fishing boat ran aground at Cape Elizabeth, and 4 people were rescued via the Coast Guard, according to WGME, CBS Maine affiliate. And so I guess the kind of story, I guess there is some hope there that comes out of this story, guys, which is really refreshing, too, at the same time. But not all the communities in not only Maine but in the United States are so lucky to have people with the foresight to have engineers. And actually, I did see this on the news. They did like full scans, more or less, of the insides of these shacks so they can recreate them like as on a 1-to-1 scale. And it is going to be cool, but I mean, it's not the same as having the real thing. Another kind of example of this prior to my lifetime, I guess, but ties back to the flood of '87, when the historical Fort Halifax up in Winslow, Maine, was destroyed by the flood. And now, given they've rebuilt the blockhouse and they've built a reproduction, but it's never going to be the same as the real thing. I would say it would be the same level of devastation, whereas like at Fort Western in Augusta, the oldest wooden fort in America, mind you, was taken away in a flood. They built that up on a ledge just up the hillside just enough that the floodwaters have never really gotten that close to it. I mean, and it's impressive that like the people back in 1754 had the foresight to go, oh, damn, there's a river there and we don't really want to lose the fort. Maybe they did it intentionally. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just got lucky or we got lucky. But at the same time, it goes to show that, like, a lot of these historical buildings and things that we hold dear to our culture, if you want to call it that, of the state of Maine, or as our culture, our local communities and culture, like for the folks down in South Portland, like these are major community institutions, so to speak. And, people have, come here after weddings. They've come after this, come after that. And it's just like, yeah, like these are important. People care about this, like these are the things that need to be preserved. And that's why, like, obviously preserving history is important, but also like making sure that we as, human beings, we as mankind are doing, kind of everything we can to take care of things. And I guess I do want to read to you guys the other part of this article, because I guess ending on a note of hope, they also were able to find a shipwreck that had been long hidden due to the destructive powers of the storm. So I'll give you guys the other side of this too. 1911 shipwreck exposed at Acadia National Park. As the winter storms pounded Maine's beaches, WABI TV reported that an artifact was unearthed at Acadia National Park, a shipwreck from over a century ago. The wreck of the Tay, a schooner that ran aground in a storm in 1911, was exposed Thursday morning at Sand Beach after being buried for decades, according to the Bangor Daily News. Some visitors gathered to see the shipwreck, but park staff reminded the public to look and not touch. Quote, there's big iron nails in there. I didn't think it would still be exposed, a visitor told the station. According to the National Park Service, on July 28th, 1911, the Tay was navigating the treacherous coastline during a very powerful storm when it struck the ledge and broke into pieces. Quote, clinging on for dear life to the broken mast, the Tay's crew waited till the tide went out so they could scramble to safety on the sandy beach, the park wrote. Most of the schooner, about 90,000 feet of spruce planks, was washed ashore by the waves. Eventually, the crew sought safety in a home owned by the Satterley family, who ultimately built a boathouse with the salvaged lumber to honor the shipwreck and its crew. Now, again, it's just like, I guess, not just ending on like a side of hope for things in that regard, but like, and try to have like a hopeful, end to the topic. But it's just like very interesting in the fact that from something so destructive, we get something, that we, from our history, and I mean, I'm not saying that, I want, more storms to destroy things, but I guess some good did come out of this, I guess, if you want to call it that. And I guess that's kind of how I wanted to leave things in terms of the storms there. But I do want to say one other thing before we move on to the next part of the episode is that I'm not a meteorologist by any means, nor am I an overly licensed man of science, but I definitely have some concerns about climate change, whether that be in tandem with the Earth's natural processes of heating and cooling, but you can't say that human beings don't add to the problems. And I just, maybe being naive and being still sub 30, but I don't remember storms ever being this bad. Again, perhaps we're going through a different time and whatever, but we as Mainers, basically upon birthright, we are stewards of the environment and stewards of the outdoors, and so I really think if more people took that mentality, it might affect who they put into office in terms of their friendliness with oil companies and other institutions like that. Listen, I drive a truck, folks. I'm not going to tell you I drive an AV and I'm a tree hugger. But like I said, there are certain things we got to do and got to convince our politicians to do in order to really protect things for people going forward. You can sit here and call me a liberal, but again, I used to work for the Republican Party. I just cared about the environment and about people. So that's why I left. But anyway, regardless of that, kind of moving on, guys, it really is important about who we put into office when it comes to dealing with the environment. Like I said, we as Mainers are literal stewards of the environment. It is our job to keep this state beautiful. And if we don't do it, no one else will. And it's the same thing with the country and the same thing with the world. And people can sit there, oh, what about developing countries? What about China? Well, you know what? If you don't even do it, you can't call people out on their bullshit. You got to police yourself before you police other people. Moving on, though, guys, going to take a step away from Maine and take a step into grabbing a quick drink of water here. No, but in all seriousness, take a step back from Maine and take kind of a larger look at the rest of the country. As you guys know, I originally went to school for political science, and so I have a pretty vested interest in the United States, as well as the cultures and the communities that make up the United States, the electorate, and everything that kind of goes along with that. And as I said in the holiday roundtable, guys, I'm weary of things to come in 2024. Not thoughts that were always shared by my compatriots, and that's fine. We all have different areas of expertise and different perceptions on things. However, being a worldly and also just political or student of politics and student of Americana and of the greater American political system, or lesser American political system, depending on who you ask. I just have a couple things that I've been looking at, in the way we've entered into 2024, and that are just big concerning points for me. And I guess we'll just kind of go over them in order. The first one being the border crisis, guys. I'm just gonna come out and say it right now. Civil war is not a good thing. Regardless if people say, oh, things are so bad, something needs to happen, I'll be the first one to agree with you. We need sweeping change in this country, but it's not going to come via violence. It comes via banding together and, protesting and doing things the right and non-violent way. Like I said, all for sweeping change, all for, protecting and having a safe border. And I'll talk specifically about the border in just a second. But the last thing we need to do is start throwing guns into the equation and things like that. If people think, oh, it's civil war, yeah. Last time we had a civil war, no one really won if you want to think about it. Yeah, you can say the North won and slavery was destroyed or made illegal anyway, but no one really won because at the end of the day, when you fight a civil war, the only people that die are your own citizens, your own brothers and sisters, your own fellow countrymen. And so I don't know why we'd want that. I don't know why folks like Greg Abbott and different people like that in Texas and some of these other governors are beating the drum. It's just concerning. And again, to speak specifically on the border for a second, yes, we need a strong, secure border. And unfortunately, that job does fall to the federal government. It's not really the state's job. Border protection, it's why we have Homeland Security. It's why we have Border Patrol agents. Now, if Congress fails to fund that's the bit. I guess any of these internal problems I talk about, guys, whether it be the border or anything, comes back not strictly on the failure of the executive office being the president, but it's a lot of these problems we're seeing here, guys, in the United States right now is a failure of Congress. Congress are the ones that are supposed to legislate day-to-day life type shit. They're the ones that are supposed to get the funding and make the budgets and do all the, and approve the budgets and do all these types of things. Make bills into laws like I'm a bill on Capitol Hill. But they don't do any of that shit anymore. And that's why we have these problems is your legislators don't legislate. Not really. Not as they're supposed to. Now, if you look at the amount of legislation passed by, the Congress in the 70s and 60s, and you look at the amount of legislation put out by congressional leaders now, it would shock you as they haven't done a fucking goddamn thing in comparison. These Congresses are being compared to the do-nothing Congresses, and it's just many of them, many members, both Democrats and Republicans, are hypocrites. They talk out of one side of their mouth and do the complete opposite. They don't work for the constituencies, and you see these problems starting to really rear their head, i.e. in the border crisis and some of the other issues which we'll see here also through the 2024 presidential election. But specifically with the border crisis, it is the job of the federal government to ensure there is a strong border. And if they fail to do that, I can understand why some of the states would be specifically border states would be upset with that. However, it's not time to go full militant on the situation. And given I can sit up here in Maine and be pretty much secure from the border and whatever, and I can say things, you can say, oh, my perspective is wrong and things like that. That's fine. Like I said, I don't live on the border. I guess you got me there. But what I'm getting at is that things should not have fallen this far. You need a safe, secure border. We have all this technology. We have drone technology. And frankly, Congress needs to get funding. They needs to be able to fund itself for more than 2 minutes at a time so that they can approve more funding to get more border agents and things like that. And again, there's a way forward, guys, but it's not through, there's a happy medium forward. Because again, you start demonizing all these folks coming over the border. You can't staff the construction industry in the southwest of this country without, Mexicans coming over the border. And, they're talking about, the Biden administration's going to make them all citizens. If they did that, guys, this shit would really hit the fan. All these people coming over, they don't get the right to vote. You have to be a citizen to vote. They're not citizens. They're asylum seekers. And I'm not people are going to say, oh, well, there's people coming in from all these other countries. And again, I'm not going to disagree with you. Yes, we need a strong border. Yes, we need a strong border. I don't think anybody should disagree with that. But there's a way to do it where you don't demonize a group of people. There is a way to do that, and it's working together. And that's the issue, is that Congress doesn't work together. One side demonizes the other, and again, part of the issue is that the Republicans are still so beholden to Trump. The second they get away from that, they'll actually start legislating. I truly believe that. When you don't have somebody who's literally fighting for his life in court, I think things will change a little bit for kind of back to the way they were. I mean, like I said, used to work for the Republican Party. We did used to make legislation, and we did used to help people, and we did used to care about the environment and a lot of different things that I guess they just don't care about anymore. The other interesting bit, looking internationally, guys, is the war that, or I guess you could, not even the war, but the continued conflict in the Middle East, whether it be on the Gaza Strip or the reinvigoration of Iraq and Iran, and the other terrorist groups coming out of Yemen. And a lot of this is interconnected because, again, guys, this was, I personally think, I mean, given Israel's going to do what Israel does, the British and the Americans set Israel up after World War II, after the Holocaust and things. And again, you're moving a bunch of Jewish people into an area with a lot of Arab people who traditionally and culturally and over the course of history hate each other. And I don't know how you ever expected to have these groups of people coexist on the same little small piece of land. It really isn't that big of an area. But a lot of this is also interconnected into larger world events of our modern age, whereas this is a great opportunity for Russia to take some of the spotlight off itself with the war in Ukraine and, shift U.S. attention out of that region and down to a region that we are already very well invested in, whether it become via the war on terror, the war to secure foreign oil and mineral interests, or whatever war you want to, dub that as our time that we were dubbing around in the Middle East or in the sandbox from, 2002, 2003 till, well, when we got out of Afghanistan a few years ago. And you look at something like that, and again, it's just, this was an area. This was a political issue that was never going to succeed in the first place. And yeah, I can sit here and say with my hindsight being 2020 that okay, boo-hoo type of thing. But at the same time, it's just too bad because similar to like some of the events in Ukraine, they're targeting hospitals, they're targeting residential targets or civilian. Excuse me, rather, I'm not a military guy, but they're targeting civilian targets, which for me is a big no-no. If you want to fight a war, do like what they did in like 1700, go line up in a field and shoot at each other. Like, I know that's pretty impractical in this grand scheme of things, but again, like, you have less civilian casualties. So I don't know, like, this whole other thing concerning. I really don't want to end up getting dragged back into the Middle East, but we shall see how things transpire with that as well. Going to grab a quick drink of water here before moving on to the next couple items on the list. And looking forward on our list, guys, obviously I talked about it. We're still very much, there's still very much fighting going on in Ukraine. Recently, literally like a couple days before going to get this episode set, Tucker Carlson came out and did an interview with Vladimir Putin. I'll be honest with you guys, I watched the first about hour of things, and the whole thing just kind of felt off to me. Not that I'm no fan of Tucker Carlson. I'll get that right out of the way. I think he's done a lot of damage to the American culture in terms of using misinformation in the media and other things like that. He just blatantly outright lied. And so let me put it to you this way, folks. I worked for Fox News for a short period of time during the 2016 New Hampshire primary. I've met Tucker Carlson. I've been in the same room as him on a few instances, and the guy's just a slime ball. He just doesn't seem like he'll just change the truth to be convenient for himself. I don't care for the guy at all, to be honest with you. But when somebody from I guess you could even call him barely a member of the American media, when you get fired from the basically mamby-pambiest of media companies, being Fox News, which is an entertainment company, when you get fired from the lying factory, you know you have a problem. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm getting at. Like I said, we police our own. I'm policing my own. As I've stated on here numerous times, I did used to work for the Republican Party. And again, the Fox News is just an extension of the RNC in a lot of ways, or really has been since the Trump presidency, if you want to call it that. And speaking of the Trump presidency, might as well get right back into it. We may have the rematch of the century, I guess, or the most misfortunate rematch in American history between Joe Biden and Donald Trump for the presidency again. I guess just kind of address that just as the on the surface. I'm disappointed. You're telling, like, I knew Biden was obviously going to be he's probably going to be the Democrats' nominee. He's the sitting president. That's kind of how you do things with the incumbent. But I thought after January 6th and everything like that, the Republican Party would really try to distance themselves from Donald Trump. Obviously not. I guess his influence extended a lot further than any sanity or any type of respectability can branch. And that's unfortunate because and again, my whole problem with this being a young person is that you're telling me Trump and Biden is the best we can do, and a Kennedy, if you want to include the third party. You're going to have RFK's, I'm here. You're going to have, Stoma Jr. in there too. And it's just like, I can't, I look at what we've been given and it's like, this is, for lack of better terms, this is dog shit. I'm so disappointed in this country into what it has given us for leadership. It's because, unfortunately, a lot of our leadership is bought and paid for by corporations, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. My last major concerning point for 2024 in the future, and it's just, I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom here, guys, but I can't tell you that things are looking great because of what they've given us for options. And again, we have a Congress that can't even fund its way out of a bucket. I mean, the Congress hasn't gone more than 3 months without funding itself over the course of the last year and whatever else. And I don't understand how we as a nation are supposed to just like keeping on with that. Again, like, I'm not calling for any major violence change in that regard, but something does have to change. And I think it's the same thing with having and it's not that I'm hating on older folks by any means, but like, the majority of the American Congress is geriatric at best. These folks, at least the leaders, the McConnells and the Bidens and these folks that have been in office for 40, 50 years. I mean, even my own, I guess you could call them mentors or former, folks role models and stuff like that, like John McCain and stuff that I looked. Yeah, they were probably in office a little too fucking long. Like the Teddy Kennedys of the world and stuff like that. Yeah, they were probably in office way too fucking long. Same thing with my own very own Susan Collins. I feel like she's been in office a little too long. All right? And it comes a point where, do you just become infatuated with power? Is it the money? Is it having the control? I don't know. But it comes a point in time where people need to do the old Georgie Washington and go, I've done enough. I've done my time in public service. Time to go back to the private sector, and I'll go back to making money, not on the backs of the taxpayers. And I think that's my biggest real gripe at the end of the day there, guys, is that, the rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poorer, and that kind of ties back into what I want to talk about in terms of the American capitalist structure. There's this gentleman, I don't know if you've heard of his name, by the name of Larry Fink. Larry Fink is actually the gentleman who's more or less solely responsible for creating the panic and the housing mortgage bubbles. He created the whole formula for it back in, for the 2008 major crisis that we had there. He was the guy who was responsible for it. You can thank Larry. And on top of that, he went after he got fired and lost his job. After losing a bunch of money for the company he used to work for, him and a bunch of his well-off to do friends from some of these other sectors, they went off to make a group called Blackrock. And if you haven't heard of Blackrock, they are one of the corporations that are currently buying up, or if they're allowed to do on their current path, they will eventually end up owning 40% of single-family homes in the United States, which is a huge problem. What's the point of being a profitable citizen if everything that you do with your paycheck is just going back to the company you already work for? Basically, they want to get back to the old coal miner mentality of, well, you don't really need to own anything. You live in a house that's provided by the company. You eat food that's provided by the company. You don't really need to own anything. Yeah, I got a problem with that. Here in America, we own shit. This is no communist fucking corporate mamby-pamby bullshit. I'm sorry. People need to own what they want to be. They need to have good, solid homes, and they need to own and feel like they actually have some stake in the game. Once people stop feeling like they have a stake in the game, they ain't going to buy shit. Just my own personal opinion. They're not going to be profitable and successful members of society if they feel like they have no stake in the game. And that's exactly what, was going to end up happening. People aren't going to feel like they have any. Why even bother? You know what I mean? And that we already have animosity like that as it is. And I just see this, getting to be more dangerous. Like I said, as a young person who would love to be able to go out and buy his first home at some point here pretty soon, it's going to make. I'm like I tell you what, I'm not going to end up renting from some massive corporate gargantuan structure, that is basically given free speech because, in the Citizens United case, money equals free speech now, and so again, massive power going to these, the Larry Finks of the world and some of these other, corporate suck bags that just aren't giving people the fair shake at the end of the day, which is just rather unfortunate. But I don't want to end this all on doom and gloom, guys, by any means. Things have been going, pretty well for myself. Like I said, just wanted to talk to you guys about some of the things that really kind of mattered to me this year so far, and just things, like I said, that kind of gotten under my skin, and just kind of looking for things to come. I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom by any means. Like I am, like life's good, guys. I'm just looking at certain world events and going, these might be a problem later on down the road. That's all. And I just, wanted to ease back into things a certain way there, and just, kind of touch base with you guys for this episode, and just kind of like tell you guys where I'm at. Still worrying about world events. Still, still same old me. Just like I said, deep into the electrical trade, and just, trying to learn a little bit, and just trying to be a kinder person and a decent member of my community every day. Because, once we take care of our own, in terms of I focus on my community, somebody else focuses on their community. Eventually, we all get together and we build one big, community together. That's kind of what I'm getting at, guys. Just trying to get everybody to work together in that aspect. And speaking of working together, one of the organizations that I am a part of, CARA, I've talked about it a lot, Capital Area Recreation Association, which manages the fields along the Peggery Road in Augusta, mile-long complex of basketball, baseball, any type of sport, really. We've got it. Like I said, I run the soccer end with my dad. Tony Dumont, who is the president of that, and work with a lot of great people. But our organization is actually turning 50 years old this year, so there will be events with that. I'll be I'm definitely involved with that, as I'm on the Cara board, and do a lot of the sound and the other music and things like that for Cara events, and so definitely keep up to date with that. I'll be sharing some Cara stuff, and come out and support the Augusta community too. On top of that, like you said, we're just trying to build things to a point where everybody feels included, and like I said, it's a big tent, and there's room for even more. So that said, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap things up with your first episode of 2024, and we'll see everybody back here in March for your March episode. Keep up to date in the meantime. The DuView podcast on all of your podcast platforms, and DuView 207 on Instagram if you want to see some more content there. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see everybody next time.